Welcome to Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. These are the stories of those who have received, given, and who are waiting for the gift of life, organ transplantation. Now here's your host and heart and kidney recipient, BJ Odom.
Welcome to the Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast, where we explore the extraordinary world of organ transplantation. Each week we share inspiring stories and introduce you to remarkable individuals sharing their own transplant stories. Be sure to support the podcast by leaving a 5-star review and subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Have a transplant story yourself you'd like to share or comments about the podcast? Please email us giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to connect with us on Facebook, Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast. This is BJ Odom, the guy with more parts than a chicken nugget. My new memoir, packed with laughs, heart, and the unbelievable true story of survival you've heard us talk about right here on the Gift of Life Podcast. Get your copy today, More Parts Than a Chicken Nugget, available on Amazon. As we welcome you to episode 121. In today's story, we're going to hear a story that reminds us how one generous decision can change a life forever. Our guest, Gina Marisa, received a life-saving kidney from her father more than 30 years ago. And today, she's giving back by helping others share their own transplant journeys through the power of writing. It's a conversation filled with hope, gratitude, and encouragement that proves every transplant story deserves to be told. We'll meet Gina and hear her story coming up next. Welcome to the podcast, Gina, and as always, let us get started by learning just a little bit more about yourself.
I am Gina Marisa, and I am a kidney transplant recipient, and I'm a mom and a recently retired paralegal, and I love photography and writing and being out in nature, and I have a recent love for hiking that I developed about 5 years ago. I'm from Florida originally, and so there's no real hiking in Florida. It's all flat. But when I started traveling, our first state that we went to was Tennessee. We were in Pigeon Forge, and we were right outside the Smoky Mountains, was our back door. And we went out several times a week to go hiking, and I just fell in love with it. And my boyfriend and I went and got, the appropriate shoes and backpacks and almost got the poles, but then we had to leave unexpectedly. So yeah, I'm definitely loving the hiking now too. What's funny is my mom says, "Why do you like hiking so much? It sounds boring. It's just walking."
Yeah, see,
it's not.
I was just going to say,
it's not just walking.
Yeah, I prefer walking in Florida because it is so flat.
Yes, I did see that you were in Florida.
Yeah, so yeah, I enjoy my walking, but yeah, although I've been in Pigeon Forge and Sevierville, got some close friends that live there. Actually, I got a handful of friends that live there. And so
nice.
I've been to that part of the world many, many times. I didn't do a lot of hiking, but I did a little.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think it's fat. I think it's great. I fell in love with it, like I said.
And you also mentioned that you write a little also. Now, is that a passion of yours, or how long have you had that passion?
Gosh, I've been writing probably since I was 10 years old. I remember making this little magazine for my parents, and I enlisted the help of my brothers to do the sports section of the magazine, or a newspaper. It was more like a newspaper. And so I enlisted my brothers. I said, "Here, you need to write something, sports related," because that wasn't me. And that's kind of my earliest memory. And then from there, through my, early teenage years, I wrote short stories and poetry and then I saw an ad in a newspaper for writing children's stories. And it asked you to send a sample of your writing in. I guess that was their way to kind of weed out if you had any sort of, inclination for writing at all. And so I sent my story in about the time that I cut my thumb, and I got accepted and went into this children's writing program, which was fabulous. And so I've actually been published in one magazine. I think it was the Nature magazine. It's a children's magazine, but it's, from what I understand, it's very difficult to get into that particular magazine. So I was very happy about that. And then I've just, continued to write off and on. I've been published in 2 books now. So yeah, I love writing.
Well, we'll get into that in a little bit because now were any of them about your transplant?
Yes. 2 years ago, I wrote like a high level story because it was like 2,500 words. It's actually a collaboration. So it was me and 14 other authors in this book. It's Becoming an Unstoppable Woman in Health and Wellness is the name of it. And so my chapter is in there, and I did write about my transplant journey.
Well, let's get started with that because I always like to say this on the show. We all have a story about our transplants. They all begin different. And thank goodness none of our stories have ended yet. That's the best part of the whole thing.
Indeed.
But let's start at the beginning. You had a kidney transplant, but obviously you didn't walk into the doctor one day and go, hey, let's do a kidney transplant. Where did it all begin for you?
I did not, although I will tell you that I feel like I have quite the fairy tale story based on stories that I've heard from other recipients in the community. I was seeing a urologist at the time for an unrelated issue. And in the course of him doing his workup, he had me have an x-ray of my kidneys. I think it's called an IVP. And when the x-ray results came back, he told me that I needed to go see a nephrologist. And I remember, because this was back before digital stuff, so no digital records, everything was paper. And I actually had to go to his office and pick up my medical records. And so I was reading through my records, and I wish that I had saved a copy or something because we didn't have cell phones back then either. But the very first word that he wrote for that day, whatever that was in all caps, underlined with exclamation points, bizarre. So whoa. I was like, yeah, that made me a little nervous. So basically, my kidneys were dysplastic, which basically means that they did not develop properly. So they lasted me for the first, 20 years of my life. But when I saw the nephrologist, he said, at some point, you were going to need a transplant. And again, at the time, I had no idea what that was. Transplant was not as, prominent and talked about 32 years ago as it is today. So I just went about, doing what he told me to do. I had to go on a low protein diet. And I think I ended up going on blood pressure medicine. I remember going to the pharmacist to pick up my prescription, and he looked at me and said, "You're kind of young to be on blood pressure medicine." And I said, "Yeah, I have a kidney issue." So that happened, and I probably did that for 2 years. I wish I had, recorded my whole experience, because after 30 years, there's so much that I don't remember. There's just certain pieces. And so I'm telling you the certain pieces that I remember. But I think it was about 2 years that I had to do that protocol. And then as it got closer, they began to test my family, which included my parents and my two younger brothers. And I am told that my brothers were not a match. I remember at the time that they told me if my brothers had been a match, that would have been like ideal, but that your parents are a half match. So since my brothers didn't match, both of my parents could have donated. But between them, they decided that my dad would donate because he had short-term disability at the time. So, and that kind of worked out because my mom became our caregiver, which was definitely better than having my dad be the caregiver. So I think it worked out the way it was supposed to. And he tells me all the time, I gave you my best kidney, though he didn't get to choose. It was funny. The doctor said, no, you don't get to choose. And so he was 50 at the time. And so he was, young and healthy, and I was young and healthy, and I never had to go on dialysis, and we actually scheduled my surgery. So January 12th of 1994 is when I had my transplant.
And it sounds like everything worked out pretty good. So now are you still on the original kidney?
I am.
That is awesome. Now, of course, I have been told also, though, living donors are much better than deceased. And of course, especially in your father's case, that is a good thing. But
yes,
but I do hear that they, have longer longevity. Now, I had mine in 2015 from a deceased donor, and it is still working along good, which makes me a happy camper.
Of course. Yes, I have heard that as well. Although I've also heard stories of people, who have had the deceased organ and are, I've seen in the groups that they have like 100% match. So it can be done. And, like you said, we're all different. So, but yes, generally, I think overall you have a better outcome with a live donor, and especially if it's related.
Okay. Now it sounds like you've been busy. So, well, let's go back those 32 years ago, or was it actually? And how was your recovery back? Because obviously the world of transplants have really changed in the last, I would say 10, 15 years immensely.
Yes.
So how was the recovery back then? And how was the recovery for your father also?
Well, the recovery on the donor is a little more difficult. And I remember being told that before we went in the hospital. I think I was in the hospital for 5 days, and then my dad was in for 6. He got in the day after me. He got out the day after me. And the other thing that I remember is that the most difficult part was they told me I had to lay flat on my back for 24 hours. So the kidney could kind of settle into its spot, which I thought was a little weird. But that was what I remember. And like that part wasn't too bad. And I remember my husband at the time was not into hospitals. And so he had a really difficult time being there. So again, it's good that my mom was around. I ended up living with them for 2 weeks, and they were living with my aunt at the time because they were having a house built. So it was a full house for 2 weeks after my transplant. And I remember slowly, walking, because they want you to walk as soon as possible. And my aunt would go out and help me, walk around the block. And, I was able to get further and further the more I did it. And I did have a couple of rejection episodes as well. I did contract the CMV virus. And I had to spend, I think, a couple of days in the hospital getting the treatment for that. And so that hasn't been an issue since. And I had another major episode in 2000, I believe. It wasn't related to my kidney, but I went nearly blind in my left eye.
Oh, wow.
And so that was kind of scary. And I saw all these eye doctors and went to all these different specialists. And it was funny too. I remember, that I was always the youngest person in there, because you go to eye doctor, you see a lot of 60 to 80-year-olds, right? And I was, in my early 30s. So, but yeah, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. And what finally happened, I think I had to have a spinal tap. And what they determined finally was that I contracted cat scratch fever. So they treated me with high-dose prednisone in the hospital, and that apparently fixed it.
Well, that's good.
I have my sight back now, which is good.
Well, it sounds like things are going well then.
Yeah. So really after 2000, things kind of smoothed out. In the first couple of years, I would get head colds every spring, toward the end of winter or beginning of spring with all the stuff blooming, I guess. And it would knock me out for 3 days. And I felt so stupid calling into work saying, I've had cold, but it has wiped me out. I cannot come in. But fortunately, my boss at the time was there for the transplant, and he was, he was very good about letting me take the time off that I needed. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, because that's one thing that a lot of people don't understand is because of the transplanted organ, you take what they call the anti-rejection drugs, which
right,
takes your immune system down, where just a common cold can take you out, like you said, for 3 or 4 days where you're not doing nothing. And, you're always worried every time you go walking around like, oh, there's some germs out here.
Yes, indeed. Although I will tell you, as, the more years that pass, I feel like for me that even though my immune system is lowered, I have done a lot of things to help me stay healthy and have a stronger immune system than I might otherwise have. I listened to one of your episodes. I think it was the woman who she had a heart transplant like 38 years ago or something. So that was pretty incredible. But she said she does a lot of research, and I do as well. And so I've become someone who is really interested in, a lot of the biohacking that's out there. And a lot of stuff is free. And like you said, there's been so many advances in the last 30 years in the field of medicine that it's really incredible. And so I do a lot of research as well and start implementing a lot of these things that, mainstream medicine might not approve of, but, it's my body and I know my body best. So I do a little bit of experimenting here and there, which, would probably freak most recipients out. But like I said, I feel like I have kind of this fairy tale story because I got a live related donor. I never had to go on dialysis, and I am doing really well today, thankfully.
And I know the person you're talking about who you heard their episode. Yeah, they were really into holistic medicine and kind of have bucked the system a little bit, and but they're doing very well. So I'm not going to say anything bad about it. Now, if she was doing bad, then I would say, okay, maybe you should go back to what your doctors are saying. But
right.
But since you're doing so well, maybe you know more than some of us know.
Well, I don't know that that's the case, but, I feel like, so here's the thing, doctors can't know everything, right? And the experience they get in school is not everything, and it's not that great. I'm hoping that that's changing now, but like 30 years ago, they had like a half an hour course on nutrition, and nutrition is super important with respect to how we are able to live a healthy life with our transplanted organ. And sleep is another thing that's so important. And I think they just kind of gloss over these things. And this is one of the gaps that I see in healthcare, especially for transplant recipients, and why I've become, I think, so passionate to want to help people, because I know so many people just rely solely on what their doctors say. And, mainstream medicine is great for, the pre-op stuff, and then the actual surgeries. It's been pretty incredible what we've experienced. But, I sent an email the other day to my boyfriend's doctor about a supplement for him to take. He has heart issues. And so I said, we should probably check with your doctor about this. And he said, oh, I don't know anything about that. And because of the research that I've done, I've seen many things about, the benefits of this particular herb. And so anyway, it's just interesting, and they don't know everything. But if you give them the research, I think that most doctors would be open to it. I would hope, at least.
Well, what I really like, and you actually hit on that yourself, we all know our own bodies better than anyone. And a lot of times, you find something that helps you that maybe, doctors aren't so sure of. But like I said, if it's working for you, then, definitely, do what's good for you. That's basically my philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to kind of give you a little hint about that. So I discovered in January that I am pre-diabetic. Thank you, prednisone. This is one of those things that, this is one of those side effects that I wasn't aware of. And, so I've just now become aware of that. And so I know from the research that I've done in the past 30 years that you can reverse type 2 diabetes, because that's a lifestyle change with your diet. So been working on my diet. And so I asked my doctor if I said, hey, I have pre-diabetes, and this is what I want to do. I want to change my diet. I want to take something that's escaping me right now, some supplement. And I said, is that okay? And the response came back, that's fine, but we can't guarantee that. And what I wanted to say, but I didn't, was, well, you also can't guarantee that Farxiga is going to help me, because that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to put me on Farxiga. And my boyfriend had just been on Farxiga, and I read up on Farxiga, and I said, nope, because you can have kidney issues as a side effect. And I'm like, I think I'm going to go this way first, because it's true, right? They can't guarantee anything with a drug either. Well, so why would I not try something natural first?
Well, I always like listening to the, whatever they call them, the disclaimers or whatever from most drugs.
Yes.
Can cause blah, 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 and death. Well, thank you very much.
Yes. Always death. I'm like, we already take so many medicines. Again, and in that respect, I'm also very blessed. I am only on 2 medicines. And I've asked several times over the years if I can get off of prednisone, and nobody wants to take me off of it. So that kind of sucks. And I go into the group sometimes and I see people who are like, oh, I don't have to take prednisone anymore. And I'm so jealous.
Yeah, I don't take it anymore either, but I've been on it a few times, and I don't want to get too graphic here, but I have basically told people it's like taking a man, giving them a pill, and putting them on PMS 24/7. So I can only imagine what it does to a woman.
Well, I am on the lowest dose, right? I'm on 5 milligrams, but and I know people have lots of, I've seen, I'm in the groups, I've seen it has horrible side effects, right? But like your mood and the weight gain, those are just two, right? It can cause osteoporosis, which I did have. And based on my lifestyle changes, by the way, I have now reversed that. But if I went to my doctor, they'd want to put me on a drug. And I'm like, the drugs for osteoporosis, like, can cause like jaw problems, like with your bones in your jaw. And I'm like, nope, pass, let's do something else. But they can cause cataracts, which I have had cataracts. Fortunately, that has not, progressed. So I had to see doctors for that. I think I developed that during that whole eye thing, and had to go see a specialist for that every year. But that's pretty under control now, and they can barely see it when I go get my eyes checked. But prednisone, I will say, it's really a pretty amazing drug. It does what it's supposed to do. Like, I got pumped full of prednisone, via IV when I went blind in my left eye, and it fixed it. But it really, really has some horrible side effects.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, I remember my heart transplant back in 2003. My daughter was in high school, so she wasn't a baby, but all I remember is that she was staying home by herself because obviously my wife, was there at the hospital with me, and my son was off married and had a baby of his own at that time. And so I was calling like her brother and my son. You got to go get her. You got to go get her. She can't be by herself. You got to go. And I was carrying on for like a whole night, calling everybody I could think of. You got to go get my daughter. She can't stay home by herself. And she's like 17 or 18, 16, 17. She was perfectly fine. But in my brain, I was like, she can't be alone.
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting because I read about, people, having these, major mood swings and then the weight gain. It's funny about the weight gain. So that's one of the first things that my doctor told me pre-transplant. I can almost remember standing in the office with him when he told me this. So I am 5'2", okay? I'm short. And pre-transplant, I did lose a little bit of weight, and I think I was 99 pounds. Okay, before I went into the hospital. And he told me that I was going to have to take steroids, and he goes, and you'll gain 50 pounds. And I just looked at him and I thought to myself, no way am I going to gain 50 pounds. I'm 5'2". I've never weighed over 105 in my life. Like, that's not happening. And so I think that, really, and the other thing that I've learned, and I didn't know it at the time when I said that, but your mindset is so important in dealing with something major like a transplant, truly. And so I just told him, nope, that's not happening. And I'm proud to say it did not happen. Even when I got pregnant, I only gained 20 pounds. Like, I wasn't trying to not gain weight, but
Yeah, you were taking care of business is what you were doing.
That's right. That's right.
I kind of like you, wrote a book about my journey as it started as a small child all the way through adulthood. I've had several surgeries and things like that. And I know we talked one time, either by text or on the phone, how that can be, so soothing. Some people call it journaling. Of course, you and I, we've written books, and I think I was you that I told when I was writing my book, it was better than therapy. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, that's what I tell people, that it's a different kind of therapy, because like in talk therapy, there are still things that you could hold back, right, from telling somebody else. But when you write it out, and especially when you write by hand, which is what I teach my students, something between like the hand and the brain, it's magical. And like you said, it's very healing. And I've had, students tell me that. And so It's amazing. And I agree. Yes.
Now, I will admit, I cheated on my book due to the fact that I, found someone who had wrote, both fiction and nonfiction books and used her, as she said, a ghostwriter. But I said, no,
okay.
you're not going to be a ghostwriter. You're going to be a co-author on this book. And she helped guide me through, but that's what we did. And that's where it was basically like therapy for me. We would set maybe once or twice a week. And I would sit there like for an hour long and just tell her stories about my life.
Okay.
And she took all of those stories and obviously put them in the book, More Parts Than a Chicken Nugget, which I'm very proud of.
I love the title, by the way.
I'm very proud of this book. And she would always ask me, well, I want it to sound like you. I go, no, it's going to be much more intelligent than me. So no, you don't want it to sound like me. But now
I feel like that's not true.
But I get people now that have read it, that have known me all my life. And they said, man, that book is so you. And I'm going, well, she did what she wanted to do then.
Exactly. I love it.
Now,
no, that's amazing.
Now let's get into a little of your writing, because you do have some books out. And obviously, I would love for you to send me those links or whatever so that we can get those in the show notes. As people know, we have show notes where people put, different things. So we'll get those on the show notes. But you've written some books. Now you do a writing class. Tell us a little bit about your writing while we have you on here.
Yeah. Okay. So in February, I decided, back up a little bit. So I was paralegal for 33 years with the same lawyer. It worked out. We knew each other well. And again, he knew my medical background. So he was very generous with letting me take time off and everything. And I learned a lot in that job, but it was never fulfilling. And I always had this desire to give back to humanity. And I just kept thinking to myself, me working in a law firm, that's not giving back, right? So I decided that after 33 years that I had had enough, and we were already traveling on the road. And so my last day was December 31st, 2024. And so then I had to decide what I wanted to do. And at first, I decided I wanted to help professionals manage stress, which is, another aspect of lifestyle that is really important for transplant recipients. But I decided to work with professionals at the time because I had just been a professional and came from that arena. And I did that for, I think, close to a year. And then it just felt too corporate. I felt like I was too close to it still. And that's not what I wanted to do. So I had already had a bunch of people say to me, why don't you work with transplant recipients? And I said, yeah, why don't I? So I decided to help transplant recipients with their health. So I became a health coach for recipients. And that was okay. And then in February of this year, I got an email from my publisher, actually, inviting me to be a partner. And I was really excited about it because I was going to be able to put my own book together. And so then I was thinking about it and said, I wonder if any transplant recipients want to write their story. And so I went to one of the groups and I said, hey, is anybody interested in writing their story? I'm thinking I'm going to get 5 people who say yes. Over 200 people. So they wanted to write their story. And I was blown away. I was completely overwhelmed. So I said, okay, well, I need to do something about this because I love writing. So that works out for me. And so I put together what I call a writing circle. It's called Your Transplant Voice. It was a 3-day writing circle that I ran in March or April of this year. And it was well received. And it was, and I did it live, and I did it in a group setting because, especially for this particular group of people, we feel connected when we're in community with other people, with other transplant recipients specifically, because we don't have to explain anything. We don't have to explain when we're tired, or, why we have to take so many medicines, or why we feel a certain way. And when people share their stories in these group settings, you see a lot of head nodding and people agreeing, right? Because, yeah, I've experienced that too. And it brings the bond really close. And I think people also open up more when they're in that setting. And it's really important because then you know that you're not alone. Mm-hmm. So from the writing circle, I developed a 12-week program to go deeper. And I actually just finished week 9 with the first cohort. And DJ, I have to tell you, it really fills my cup. And I'm going to have goosebumps right now to know that I am helping people to write their story, and that they are also getting a form of healing from it. Like you said, that you can't get from talk therapy. Not that talk therapy is bad. This is it's a different form of therapy that I think a lot of people don't even know is available to them. And I mean, I don't know of any other program out there, that's like this. I pretty much created it out of thin air because I saw the need. And it has been like the greatest experience for me. It's hard, as a writer, it's very difficult for me to put it into words, but that's what's going on right now.
Well, even with me and doing this podcast, it's kind of the same thing. For me, it's rewarding. And I hear other stories, weekly, and I'm thinking, I relate so much to this story, or I relate so much to this. And, just me knowing that I'm helping the community is so fulfilling myself. And they always say, if there's a niche out there that needs to be filled, there could be a job there. And you have found a niche that needs to be filled. At the same time, you can find a job there, as far as, this can, and hopefully that's what you're thinking about. You do this one, and then you take another bunch, and then you take another bunch. Right. And yes. You can have a whole series of books coming out, from all this also.
That is, so I have grand ideas, BJ, what I would love to do, and what, like, kind of my first thought when I saw this was, and then I went and I did some research, right, to see if there were any books out there. And I found a handful, like not very many, but I would love to bring these stories together in kind of like an anthology, and then have them available to clinics, dialysis units, people who are behind us and who have no idea and who don't know what to expect. I think it would be very beneficial to read stories from other transplant recipients. And so that's kind of my high level goal. And I'd love to be able to speak at medical conferences about why this is important. And yeah, so that's kind of my goal. And I think also one of your interviews that I listened to, there was a woman who talked about how she volunteers at her local hospital and talks to other people who are pre-transplant. And I did that as well and found it very fulfilling. In fact, it was funny because I also had someone who talked to me, the woman that I talked to, she was older. She was probably in her late 60s, early 70s. And again, I'm in my mid 20s at the time. And she was on her 3rd kidney. And all I remember thinking, and then she told me that it goes in your stomach, right? Well, that freaked me out, right? I'm I had this flat stomach in my mid-20s, and I'm like, what? Where's that going to go? And then they don't remove them unless they're diseased. And I just was like, how am I going to wear a bikini on with all of these kidneys in my stomach? So that, these are the things that were running through my mind. But I thought that was, beneficial talking to her. And so I wanted to do the same thing. And I did. But when I went back, the first person I'm talking about my scar, and how big my scar is. And the guy looked at me and he goes, they told us it was going to be like 2 inches. And I'm like, what? And so he was educating me because I guess by that point they were doing them laparoscopically or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was like, oh, okay. So, there's so much that I don't know because I'm so far removed from that arena,
Yeah, I remember when I first found out that I was going to need my heart transplant. I found out there was I was in Fort Myers at the time, and they have a support group there. Of course, I went to the very next meeting I could to find out what this world's all about. And I found it, so open and, heard stories and things like that. The only thing, and I know everyone is different personally, and I worked hard for that organization for quite a few years, but I got to a point because I was doing so well, I would hear all the stories, like not doing well. And then I would get like very, very depressed. And so I kind of got to the point where, I drifted away from the meetings because I thought it was doing more damage than good. But in the very beginning, when I first learned that I was going to need to do this, that was my saving grace right there, was going to those meetings. And then even afterwards, for the first couple of years, but then of course, I maybe it's just me, but that's the only problem that I have with those groups.
No, and I completely agree with you, and I understand what you mean, which is another reason why I try to promote a lot of positivity. And I posted something in the group the other day, and somebody made a comment unrelated to the question that I was asking, and said something about how I love the positivity in your posts. And I'm like, yes, that's what I'm going for. I'm trying to, bring some more positivity into your life, because it can be very draining to go into those groups sometimes with a lot of the negativity. And again, I think mindset is really important. So I want to share that and promote that. And so, I totally get the draining effect from the negativity. It's difficult.
Well, I truly believe, a positive attitude. And of course, also, any medical bed, this is in the book about when I go into the hospital and I'm in my medical bed, that becomes my comedy stage. And I'm back on the comedy stage, and I'm making the nurses laugh. Sometimes you can't get the doctors to laugh, but you can get the nurses to laugh.
Yes.
And I think the humor and the positivity is the only reason that I'm alive talking to you today, with everything that, I've been through in the past, 70 years of my life.
Humor's great. 100%. We need to laugh more.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I love it.
Any last comments before we let you go? And like I said, please send us the links, the names of all of your books, and we'll make sure that gets into the show notes there, Gina. But before we let you go, is there anything maybe we missed or anything you want to get out there before we let you go today?
Well, one kind of important thing for me that I didn't share at the beginning is that 6 months after my transplant, I got pregnant. The medical team was not happy with me. I wasn't trying. My nephrologist actually told me that I had kind of a slim chance of getting pregnant before I was transplanted, which I didn't know that at the time either. But I got pregnant, and so I had to see a high-risk OB. My high-risk OB team was fabulous. I have, nothing but great things to say about them, and helps me to get through with it. And she was I had to go on bed rest 3 weeks before she was born, and she was born 3 weeks early. But she is a thriving 31-year-old today and married, living in North Carolina with her husband. And I am so blessed with the chance and the opportunity to have a child. So I wanted to throw that in there too.
Not a problem. And of course, you get to spend all those days with your child that maybe if the transplant wasn't, possible, you'd have never had. You wouldn't get to see this, right, and you wouldn't have had that. And so I always tell people, it's not only about the transplant, it's about the years after that we receive. And let me ask you this, since we've been kind of talking about that. As you have your writing class, and I know that I have that here doing the podcast often, that the word I hear the most is gratefulness and happiness. In the writing sessions, gratefulness, was that one of the key words you kept hearing over and over again?
Yes. Gratefulness is definitely one of the words. And yeah, and it's difficult to explain because, if you have a non-related or a non-living donor, then you also have the flip side of knowing that, somebody died to, for you to live. And so I think a lot of people grapple with that. And since I didn't have that, honestly, I can't speak to that. I can imagine what that's like, but I can't speak to that. But yes, definitely people are thrilled to be alive. Oh, yeah. Right. And have done some incredible things. I mean, I've had some incredible experiences that, because I'm not, and because I never was tied to a chair and dialysis, I wouldn't have been able to do if not for the transplant.
Yeah, and that dialysis thing is basically like a full-time job. I went through it for a little over a year, and you're there, and it's like, you got to be there, and it's, got to be 3 days a week. And they, not only do you go in and get the dialysis, but they put the needles in, they take the needles out. It's a whole process where even if you're doing 4 hours of dialysis 3 times a week, it's not 4 hours. It's getting to the clinic. Right. It's waiting. Yep. It's getting the stab. It's getting the, the treatment, the unstab. And so your 4-hour treatment really tends to be, 5 to 6 hours.
Yes. I've heard that. And yeah, I don't know how people do it. But just one other thing that you reminded me of, when you were talking about doing the podcast. So since I've started doing this, I have met so many recipients, who are now advocates, and like some amazing people out there doing amazing work for our community. And so I just want to put a shout out to all of those people, because it is really important work that we're doing, and people do need help. There's gaps in the medical system. And so we are there to fill it, and it's a real need. So there's amazing people out there. I will say that this community is one of the most caring and giving communities that I in my life has ever met. And of course, being sickly as a kid, I was involved with the American Heart Association, and so were my parents. Mm-hmm. And I mean, they're caring, and they do a lot for the American Heart Association. But until I entered the world of transplantation, I mean, it's a world that, it's a community that embraces one another, helps one another, and will do almost anything they can for one another. And I have found that. And I wanted to make one statement, and I've never said this on the podcast. I don't know why I'm saying it today. Maybe because today I kind of feel at ease with you, and this is maybe going to be therapy for me. I don't know. So this will be a first that I've said on the podcast, because I hear what we were talking about a few minutes ago, where when someone has to lose their life for you to live, and how hard that is for some people.
Here's the way I looked at it, and I don't know if it's the wrong way or not. And if it is, I apologize to everyone. But the person that I felt died for me to get my transplant, they were going to die no matter what. There was nothing I could do to save them. There was nothing, because the doctors would do their utmost to keep them alive and to save them. And then for the family, to be that caring to donate those organs, to let others live and others have better lives are unbelievable. But that's what I always tried to put in the back of the mind. There was nothing I could have done. I guess maybe it needs to be something that a doctor says in the back of their mind too. There's nothing I could have done that would have prevented them from dying. And so I am so thankful for them to give me the organ that was given to me. And I don't know if that makes any sense to you or not.
No, it does. And I really think that that's a really great way to look at it, because what I hear is that the guilt can be so overwhelming that people aren't out there living their lives.
And I've heard that, yes.
And you have this second chance, right? This gift of a second chance. Why would you not go out and live your life to the fullest?
Yeah.
So I would probably feel the same way as you if I ever had to have another transplant down the road. But yeah, I think it goes back to that positivity, right? It's so important. And you're right. I mean, if somebody dies in a car crash, they were going to die anyway.
Yeah. There's nothing that I could have physically done, or the doctor has probably done anything different to change the outcome.
Right. So also I would say not to apologize for your feelings, because they're yours.
Right. Well, thank you for that. But that, I've never said that on this podcast. I've often thought when we've had this conversation to say that out loud, but I don't know. You did it, Gina. You got it out of me, and I don't know how you did it. Maybe it's that author thing, because I know Christina Metcalf, who was my co-author, got things out of me that I'm sitting there go, how did she get that out of me? I got no idea.
I love it.
Well, anything else real quick before we let you go?
No, I think we've run the gamut of experiences.
Thank you so much, Gina, for sharing your story on the Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast, and the very best of luck to you in the future. Be sure to join us each week for a new heartfelt episode. And if you have a transplant story, please email us, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, and also don't forget to like and share this episode with family and friends. And we would appreciate that 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Reminder, my memoir, More Parts Than a Chicken Nugget, isn't just a medical story. It's the story of my life. It's a survival story filled with humor, hope, and heart. It'll make you laugh, maybe cry, and definitely believe in second chances. Get it now on Amazon, More Parts Than a Chicken Nugget. Another podcast you might enjoy is myself and former radio partner Bill Stevens. BJ and Bill, the podcast, all on the Podcast Playground Network. And we want to thank them for making this podcast possible. Until next time, I'm BJ Odom. Thank you for being a part of our journey and reminding us all to appreciate each and every day and to treasure the extraordinary gift of life.